Hello, everyone. My name is Brittany, and this is the Berg Tech and Leadership podcast series by the Seidenberg School of Computer Science and Information Systems. Our guest for today is Tjasa Ferme, the co-founder and artistic director of the innovative Transforma Theater, which is a theater that combines the creativity of the arts with the complexities of science. Transforma Theater is known for putting on productions that tell the stories of technology's greatest innovations in a way that is both unique and profound. Tjasa's personal background in acting and love for performance is a significant contributor to Transforma Theater's overall success. Transforma Theater has been recognized not only in the American Theater magazine, but it has also been recognized by Forbes for being a contender in the technology-driven theater. So without further ado, welcome Tjasa, and thank you so much for being on our podcast today.
Hi, Brittany. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you so much for this amazing intro.
Yes, of course, no problem. Okay, so I am very curious to kind of just know, again, I already said that you have background in acting. Could you just kind of tell me a little bit more about your background overall, like your interests growing up, how that tied into acting and how that led you to here?
Yeah, sure. Oh my God, that's a long, crazy story. It started when I was 8, and they dragged me into the drama club, and they said, "You're going to be playing the witch." And then they gave me the script. And the moment I got the script, I felt transformed. I felt high. I felt totally on a different plane. And it was really crazy because later on after the performance, my mom said, "So how did this feel?" And I said to her, I grew up completely secularly. There was like no religion whatsoever. And I looked at my mom at 8 and I said, "I was on God's frequency." So very early on, I got kind of like addicted to acting and to theater. And that was not too far from my dad, who was a musician and a little bit of a rock star when I was growing up. And I think that kind of said it. I don't think I ever wanted to do anything else but acting from that point on. And then the path was pretty straightforward. I got to the, to the university, to the Academy for Performing Arts. I grew up in Slovenia. That's where this happened. And then I got the National Film Award and the Classic Stage Award by the age of 22. And I think I just wanted more challenges. I wanted to play more. Maybe actually I didn't want to be just an actor, just that I didn't consciously know that. So then I moved to New York because anybody I'd ever met in Europe said, "Oh my God, you can talk to anybody. You're such a New Yorker. Go to New York." So I did. And New York kicked my ass. I think like it does to everybody else, which is probably what I came here for. And then, very quickly, I think I realized that in New York, you have to generate your own work, that, just going to auditions kind of won't totally cut it. So I started writing and producing my own shows. And somewhere along the way, I also created 2 one-woman shows and I toured a lot with them. But at some point, I think I realized that, again, to make a difference, you got to be different. You have to like do something that stands out a little bit, the cutting edge, if you want. And so at the time, I was working for The Economist, and they had this new section that was coming out that was called Future Forces, and they were really focusing on reporting on epigenetics, quantum physics, neuroscience, AI. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, like if I'm on board with this, then I have to educate myself. And as I started doing this, I kind of fell in the rabbit hole of YouTube and futurists and TED Talks, and all of a sudden my world was just like, and I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. This is what I have to do. I have to bridge the 2 worlds, because I think what's really interesting is, theater is a place that brings people together. And then you can sort of like examine different subjects. And since the beginning, I was really interested in the danger of interactive theater. What happens if people are actually engaged, if it's not just staged and, it's not just put on, but something actually happens in the moment, something new, uncharted, something that I can't predict, nor can they. And so I started thinking, can we create somewhat of like theater experiments that include science, conversations in which we all learn something mind-blowing and new. And if it can be experiential, so if it's an actual experiment, that's much the better.
Mm-hmm. And I like what you said about how when you came to New York and just trying to find something to kind of stand out. I feel like this was it. You know what I mean? Like, because, looking into the work that you do, if you were to ask me if I know of anyone or if I know of like any other organization that does what you do, I would be at a loss because I feel like it's its own space. And I feel like you recognize that, just from your own personal experience. And I like that you, kind of got into that mindset and also educated yourself so that, in creating this and putting everything together, you are knowledgeable. You can see that, okay, this is someone who like has done their research. You work alongside individuals as well who are experts in this field. So how has it been, working alongside these people who have so much knowledge of all this, and how do you work alongside them to create the pieces that you create?
Yeah. So maybe first I want to speak to a part that wasn't exactly a question, but I think that it's worth talking about, which is that, yeah, at some point you realize that when you want to do something, that it's not enough that you're just an artist. And, like you can be various types of artists. You can be an actor and a playwright. There has to be like a component where you kind of like bring business or entrepreneur mindset into the situation so that you know how to properly organize, right? And as we're growing, I'm actually noticing, oh my gosh, there's so much arts administration and grants administration and fundraising that comes into it, and that's like its own beast. And yeah, I have been, it's a continuous process. Like, I don't think you can ever stop, but I have been like learning about that a lot because I have to, right? Either kind of like sink or swim. So I choose to swim, but it's like, it's hard work.
Mhm.
And in terms of, working with scientists, it's been really, really interesting. I feel like that's the whole point. Again, I think that I have like a little bug that always tells me, oh my God, get into situations that you don't know enough about, or, get into situations that are weird. And so it has been a little bit like that. It is a different world with a different set of rules. Like theater as a space is exactly the space of make believe and imagination, whereas science is really data driven. Like, you can't really say certain things because they're not scientifically proved. Example, we were doing the female role model project, and we had a live neuroscientist on stage with us interpreting brain activity live. And I think that at some point we're like, oh my God, but like, say something more. Can't you be more specific? Like, can't you say this particular activity in temporal lobe means that this person is really excited or really happy? And they were like, absolutely not. What I can say is that this area is aroused, which means that there's a emotional response, but really it could be anywhere on the scale of, happy to sad. So I think that, like between the theater, which, it's right, we're making a show, right? This is show business, and wanting to be declarative and wanting to be, even like, I'm going overboard, but let's say pompous. And then on the other side, science and scientists who would never compromise their integrity, for that. So definitely, it's a whole process. It's a whole dialogue. How do you make both parties happy?
Yeah. And how do you find that balance though? Because like you're saying, because science is so fact driven, it's like, again, it's still a performance. So how do you find that balance between, okay, the science of it, like we have to like say it for what it is, but how do we still make it in a way that will, gauge the audience?
I feel like in a few ways, one is certainly how you set it up. Second one, and maybe the most important for me, is transparency in a way that, you say, hey, we would really love to say, X and Y and D, but as a matter of fact, the truth is what we can do on stage right now is this. And then I think that the third component that people really respond to and has been working really well is interaction, right? As soon as people are actually involved, like during the female role model project, we would get volunteers from the audience who would come on stage and do a scene with an actor. The actor would share a story about their mother, and then the audience member was invited to reciprocate and tell a story about their mother. And this is when we sort of like measured both of their brain activities. But I think that something that theater can provide is a dramatic setup and an interactive invitation. And then, science is science. So you do the best you can to, present it in an exciting way that means something, right? That it's not just totally vague. There's an activity, therefore you're alive, right? It's a joke, but anyways.
I do think, the interactive portion of it, like you said, really does, aid in that whole engagement process. And I think that people in the audience being able to like volunteer and have the opportunity to share their experiences and contribute to the whole of the production really does help, again, in making it, very engaging, very interesting. You're talking about your production. Could you kind of go more into detail about the female role model project?
Sure. Oh my God, this was so exciting. This was really like Transforma's first major theater piece. This was a devised piece in which we had 4 completely different performers, completely different age-wise, where they came from. We had a performer from Singapore. We had a performer from China. We had a performer from a Caribbean island. Like I said, age-wise, all of that. And then we kind of like looked at our trajectory as a woman and how different women role models influenced us at different points of our lives. And then we sort of like told stories that were sometimes spoken from a point of view of me, but sometimes also spoken from a point of view of being and embodying this role model. And then really kind of like looking into how did this role model kind of like rub off on me, right? Because people learn by osmosis or by absorption. So, just like carrying a person close to you, or, like whether that is a real person from your actual life, or this is, a celebrity that you aspire to, in some ways be like. But there is an actual exchange, right? And so I was really actually interested in, the primary question that I had that I wanted to answer with the show was, if we look at my brain activity when I'm playing Lady Macbeth, if we look at my brain activity when I play Catherine from Taming of the Shrew, and when I'm just myself, is there like a signature? Can we say, oh, this is like a Tjasa mode, or this is Catherine mode, or this is Lady Macbeth mode? So I was really actually kind of interested in, does the consciousness change? What does even like constitute an identity? Can we see like a brain difference between, different identities being played? And that was kind of like a tall order. Again, like this was like my big idea, but, when the science comes in, you can see certain things that happen in the moment, but we couldn't really, the science hasn't answered, or I don't know. Nobody has answered, like the hard question about consciousness, right? Does our brain produce it, or does the brain pick up on it and it's transmitted from somewhere else? A lot of people talk about embodied cognition, which means that, like the whole body is somewhat in a field. Right. There's so many theories, but we don't know. So this question was a really tall order. And I'm really interested in it, and I would love to explore it further. So if any neuroscientists are watching this and they're also interested in the question, I'm super interested.
Yeah, maybe they can help you.
Yeah. Let's explore this further. So that's what kind of happened on a medical level. And then in terms of how the brain activity was connected. So basically we had brain activity that was manipulating the video design. The brain activity was really influencing the music at a certain point. We had a part of the show that was called Be the DJ of Their Brains. And we're basically embodying different famous characters and then improvising within them. And the idea was for audience to ask us, a provocative question to basically hear our brain response. So by sort of like, emotionally provoking us, they would hear sort of like a difference from a baseline to, what happens then. And then, like I said before, we also had a live neuroscientist interpreting our brain activity live in a scene with mothers. So an actor was paired with an audience member, both of them shared stories, and we're wearing emotive headsets for basically detecting the brain activity.
Wow, that's honestly so impressive. It's like all these different things coming together. Like again, the visuals, audio as well is a very key component in storytelling. There's so many components just overall. What was it kind of like? I'm assuming you work alongside a team. What is it like creating a production? Because I'm a novice, so I don't quite know. And I know that a lot of people will be interested in kind of hearing the whole process because, I'm hearing you talk about it. You are obviously very passionate about what you do, but just like in the process of creating everything, because again, there's so many people working together to create something that people can experience. Like, how is that process of, directing and just putting everything together, basically essentially making it happen? Like, how do you go about that when there's so many things to, make sure are in place?
Wow, I don't even know where to begin. It's really the producer job, or sorry, like the leader job is really hard, right? You sort of like, I guess, like you lead with a vision, you have a vision, and then you get people who are also passionate about this vision. And then, I was primarily working in shaping this performance. So, which means that we would come together in a rehearsal and we would workshop things and we would talk a lot. Not everybody already came in with, oh, this was my role model, this was my role model, and this was my role model. And these are the kind of monologues that I have in mind. Maybe sometimes you would feel this way, but usually it was a process of unveiling, right? And working together to see what works, where it goes, what does it mean, how is it actually connected to like the whole of you. So this was like our devising theater process, and devising is just when you're working and generating text with the group together, when you don't come in and there's a written script, but you're sort of like collaborating on working it. And I will say that we've had 2 workshop productions before then. So we have been testing and playing a lot and trying different things out, and just like, through the feedback, seeing what works. We also had like an immersive version. So, all these prior steps before going into the full production, and again, kind of like rebuilding it, it kind of gave us like molds for which scenes work, which formats work. And then we just sort of like, worked with devisers, people who were in the room for the final production, to really get the stories out and embed them into these like little like scenes that we decided we would do. And then on the other end, you find the designers again, who also like understand the vision, share the vision, and are just like excited to try it out. I feel like Justin, Ethan Matthews, who was our sound designer, and then John Janone, that it was our video designer. I feel like they both came on board, not because this production paid so well, but because ultimately, because there was a challenge and because they needed to invent something for this. And so I think that was the true reason. And I feel like in the industry, ultimately, a lot of people come on board for this very reason, that, there's just such a novel concept that they surprise themselves, or that they have to surprise themselves in order to deliver. Yeah. And, like I remember when we were in tech and things were not working yet, and, we were still like workshopping so many things, from the technical point of view. I will say that working with technology on stage live, whew, that's its own thing. And you always have to have a backup plan or a few backup plans, or just sort of like script for that. And, I
Mhm.
think that also part of the beauty of creating these kind of shows and, something potentially going wrong is that people know that this is actually live. This is live theater and shit happens. And
Mhm.
they're just like a part of this unique situation of like, what went wrong today? I remember this was funny. We were at 3LD, and I remember it was one of the nights that we were totally sold out. And we want to start the thing, and I think the breaker went out. And so, and otherwise you would be just like, you would bring the ladder, and like you would reach into the vents, or I don't know where the breaker switch was, but kind of like far up on the ceiling, and it's a tall ceiling. But we couldn't do that because we had platforms in the theater with people in them, so we were like, what do we do? And
Mhm.
so, one of my team members very bravely volunteered and kind of like climbed maybe through the vents to get to the point on the ceiling to like reset it. And, we were like, is this gonna work? Like, can we do this? Like, what are we
Mhm.
gonna do with them? And I remember like somebody at some point were just like, bring them wine, bring them like, entertain them in a way, or make this pleasant for the audience. But I think that the audience was having a lot of time. They had an extra 10 minutes to chat. Something really exciting was happening. They were watching the Spider-Man kind of climb. They got free wine. So at the end, it was like an exciting experience. So I think that in live theater, no matter what goes wrong, there's always an opportunity, or a way to look at it as an opportunity of a live event,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Mhm. I like how, earlier you kind of mentioned in terms of, creating these like productions, there's a lot of trial and error and figuring out what can work. But then also again with that example just now, just goes to show that you and your team have like a knack for just thinking on your feet as well. And just making use of what is happening around you. And again, with the quick thinking and having that ability, right? When like in the beginning you were kind of talking about Transforma and how you kind of had to get into like a different mindset, like outside of what already you're familiar with acting, you're familiar with performance, but in creating Transforma, um, you had to get into more of an entrepreneurial mindset for that. So could you kind of go over how that process has been? Because I don't think that a lot of people really know what it takes to create that. They always kind of hear people talking about, I started this company or I started this organization. And, the way that people talk about it, because they're in the midst of it, they don't realize, okay, like for you, yes, you created this, but to the novice, it's like, how do you even do that to begin with? It just sounds so, yeah, it just sounds like a foreign concept to a lot of people. So can you kind of just talk about that? Because I am very intrigued by how that even began with, yeah.
I will do my best. I do recommend a book, Girl Boss.
Okay.
There's plenty others, but Girl Boss definitely comes to mind in terms of sort of like, shaping me, and sort of like just like go, 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 persist, persist, persist. Um, okay. So for forming a non-for-profit, you got to have an idea. You got to have a vision of what this is. And then you kind of write out your business plan, and you kind of look at, okay, so what do we stand for? What's our mission? What do we want to do? What do we want to bring to the people? What's our contribution? What's novel about it? And what kind of impact do we want to have? And who are we for? Who's really our audience? So this is where I started. And then you kind of like sketch out what are some of your like signature works that you want to create. Then you find two other people that think, oh, this is a very swell idea. Why don't we get incorporated? And so, 3 months later or 5 months later, you do. That's bureaucracy, and good luck. And then I feel like, on one end, there's like the operational part, which is like, okay, so you want to do this show, great. Um, and so how are you going to make this show? how are you going to pay for this show? So I think that a really big sort of like question here is like, how are you fundraising? So you have to start applying for grants, which at the beginning is like, oh my God, so like heartbreaking, because you're not excellent yet, probably, most likely. I wasn't. And you're also a beginner company. You don't really have a track record, and most grantors want some kind of a track. So when you begin, it's kind of like a little bit of a catch-22. Well, how do you make something if you have no money? But they won't give you any money unless you've done something.
Yeah.
So that's on the operational side, and this never goes away. Like, this never ever goes away. And then you think, oh, I got this grant. Fantastic, congratulations. But you know what? There's still work. There's so much admin work to just sort of like, after you said, yes, you got it, to sort of like set it up, to process it. And then, for the production side, it's like, great. So, what do you want to do? Excellent. Now, rehearsal space, performance space. Who are we working with? Who's your team? So it's like casting, building team, looking for alliances. What I do, and like, bless everybody that's like worked with me and have helped us in any way, but like, I feel like, look for your alliances. Is there like a university, a school, a church, a gym where you can rehearse in? Is there like a place where you can have free rehearsal space? So the budget that you do have, and at the beginning, that's probably going to be modest. So this budget can go to, funding the artists, even if it's like $200. Cool. It just like, so that, what you're spending your money on. Traditionally venues in New York are crazy expensive. But there's also, presenting models, there's co-production models. So look for those opportunities where basically, you can get the space for free, because otherwise the space in New York is usually one of the really, like the money eaters. It's like where you spend a lot of budget. And I will say for Transforma, our challenge right now is like, we're wanting to work with high tech and new tech. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And, all this technology is expensive. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden it's, again, how do we make this happen? Being a new company, we want to create the work that we stand for and what we state in our mission, but how do we really move forward? Yeah. Like, buying new tech is crazy expensive. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I feel like we're constantly sort of like, trying to come up with new models and partnerships and get new grants, and, plead our supporters to, give more so that we can do that. So we can, mm-hmm. in a way, keep our promise. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's also like important that, like in any process, there's a reality check. And then yes, it's challenging, but it's not like, oh, I don't accept that. Yeah. Well, at some point, right, you have to accept it also, because let's say if I make an agreement with a venue that we're going to do our show there in September, and, I get a grant which needs to be spent by the end of the year, that's somewhat of a timeline, right? So it's not endless. So at some point there, at some point there's going to be a reality check. So you're going to have to be like, okay, how do we adjust? How do we pivot? How do we say yes and to the situation that has arisen?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that, again, the thinking on your feet, having to just kind of go with what's going on and being able to navigate that. And I'm assuming also just learning, because like you said, you're starting something new. So you're not too, even though you do have the experience, like acting, performance, again, starting the organization itself, something completely, new to you. And, so you're starting Transforma, and then also, producing and putting all these things together. You had to learn like a lot of things. And I want to know, what are like some very key lessons that you've learned from this whole process that you feel like, have pushed you forward
Yeah. Okay. This is like a yogic lesson, but like if you are able to hold the pose long enough, whatever you want will come to you.
Hmm.
Which means, several things. First of all, that you persist, but you persist not with just like, super penetrative force ahead, which you also need, but you need to be able to sort of like believe in your thing enough to let time and people adjust to this pose and eventually for things to come to you. Um, then the other side of the same lesson is that, challenges happen. So how can you sort of like hold your position and know what you want and be a kind person, um, and basically overturn every situation or look at every situation from a positive standpoint.
Hmm.
So, oh great, you told me that I suck, or you told me you no longer want to work with me. Okay, okay, okay. Like what matters here? Well, probably what matters here is the relationship, right? Can we at least clear up the relationship so we both move on without any baggage? Or can we save the relationship, so that we actually continue working together? Is this a possibility? So like always kind of like looking at things with love. Because I mean, burning bridges, it's not fun. And it's not fun, but it's also not constructive. Like we're a set pool. So I think that like learning how to work with people and learning how to lead with patience and love, I think that this is maybe like what I'm maybe one of the biggest lessons, and a continuous lesson, right? How can you be a good leader? How can you sort of like, lead with trust and create a platform where there's true collaboration and where people feel safe to come to you and to talk to you and to explore? Um, Ultimately, it's really like relationship management
Yes.
position. Yeah.
Hmm. And, I like what you said about maintaining those relationships. I think that sometimes, you know, people will kind of have, or I guess like falling outs or odds, or, they try to make something work and it doesn't. And it's important to be mature and respectful about that, because again, if you're trying to excel in this space, you could burn this bridge and then in the end it might like come back around to you. So I like that you're aware of that and kind of putting, and also just like your faith in what you've created and your passion for what you've created has allowed you to get into that mindset where you're just trying to do what is best for you and what is best for your organization. And you have a wealth of experience just in performance and things of that sort. And I know that with Transforma, you guys also have your science and theater festival. And I kind of wanted to just know, I know you guys have another festival coming up. I wanted to kind of give you the opportunity to talk about what is upcoming, let you kind of showcase that, what people can expect, because again, it's coming soon. Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. So Science and Theater Festival is actually happening next weekend, December 9th through 11th. And it's a really exciting space where we basically put playwrights and scientists in tandem. We had 3 tandems and they together write a play, or rather, I'm sorry, the playwright writes the play that's somewhat inspired by the science of the scientists that they're paired with. So every night you're going to see a different play, which is going to be followed by a science presentation, sort of like TED Talk style. We're very used to that. And then at the end, we're going to see a panel of professionals, both from the art side and science side, that are going to discuss and explore the themes that have aroused that came out of the play. So on Friday, we actually have a play that's about neuroscience of lucid dreaming.
Mhm.
And one of the panelists just launched a dream app. So you're going to be able to
Ooh.
actually test it out and see it in VR after the panel. The
Mhm.
second play was written based on a research of a South Korean scientist that created a toilet which transforms excrement into power. And for every deposit, so yes, every time you go to the bathroom, you get an eco currency, which you can then use at this university. So it's called Transforming One University Campus Sewage into Power and Ecocurrency. And that was written by Julia Rosenblatt. It's a really exciting and really fun piece. So this theme is more about ecology and sustainability. And then the third night, we have Frozen, the egg freezing musical. And it's, really around egg freezing and the policies around the world. Like, our playwright is Chinese. So basically in China, you can't freeze your eggs if you're unmarried. You can go to Taiwan and freeze your eggs in Taiwan, but in Taiwan, you can't take them out unless you're married. Right. So it's, it brings up all these sort of like, again, reproductive rights. Who owns the rights about our bodies, and who sort of like decides what? So not only this is a fun musical, you really kind of work towards unveiling many layers of this journey, and not presenting women who are freezing their eggs or as victims. So not only does this have like a very fun flair and multidimensionality, it also talks about policies, our rights, freedoms, and we're going to have a very interesting guest on the panel that's really in the fertility rights advocacy space. She's an attorney. And so maybe I said a lot about the second and third, but not so much about the first. That one's actually based on more surf research written by Catalina Florescu. And it's this extremely rich play about, what happens on the other side. What happens during your dream time? Who are the dream characters? Can you contact people that have passed away in your dream space? And just some very moving and rich character and language texture.
Wow, I'm sorry. I'm just like in awe. All these sound so interesting and so cool. And again, like the dream map and just, finding the connections between everything is just so amazing to me. I'm sorry, like I'm just so in awe. Wow,
well,
those productions are so, yeah, it's just really cool, very, very cool concepts. And I also like that you are also having, the panelists kind of in conjunction with the performance. It kind of allows, elaboration on what it is that people just viewed or what people just experienced. And again, like I didn't even know about those policies. So again, the educational aspect of that as well is very impressive and just very profound. My last question for you is really just about this in terms of, again, you are show running, you are making sure that everything is running smoothly. What would you say are some, key traits, key characteristics to be a creative director, to be you, essentially?
Yeah, I feel like finding people who resonate and then trusting them completely, because I can't micromanage everything. There's so many moving pieces. So that's your job. Find a person you like and trust them. So lead with trust. That's definitely one. And then, you kind of like, you have no idea when you start this, how much communication there's going to be, or like what the needs are, how, the constant back and forth. So just sort of like one of those things that you're like, wow, like I'm a gardener. I'm like, again, managing the relationships. There's a lot of that. So you need to love working with people if you get on board of something like this. And then, again, you have like so many completely different people. You have professors, you have scientists, you have artists, so many different characters, so many different profiles. And I think that you have to put on a lens of like, this is fun. And then, also just like being like trusting the process and, knowing, like being flexible, routing the thing in the correct direction, and then letting it sort of like change and be soft and pivot and letting it find its own organic shape. Yeah.
Wow, that is a very good insight. And I can just tell you seem to be very good at what you do. And I'm guessing it's just from, again, a lifetime of experiences, just in general, just genius and just so many things all together. Again, I really want to thank you for, talking to me, talking to us about, your experience, your upbringing, the work that you do, how you got into all of that. I'm honestly very grateful to have received this knowledge. Just thank you so much for again, just being here. The work that you do is just profound. I am honestly like in it gives me hope for the technology space within creativity because I do consider myself a creative person. So it's just been very interesting to kind of hear how you've been able to just like, marry these two different, like concepts. So again, thank you for that.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for this opportunity. It was amazing speaking with you. And I just want to say we'd love to see you and meet you at Science and Theater Festival next week. And also, I'm super interested and open to new collaborators. So please contact me. Find
Yeah,
us
of
on
course.
transformatheater.com and let's take this further. Yeah, definitely.